The Italian Film Commissions Association. Do you want to shoot your film in Italy and don't know where to start from? The Italian Film Commissions Association offers you the know-how and support you are looking for. Fred.
Hello and welcome to Fred Film Radio. I'm Amani Mohammed.
Fred Film Radio, sono Paolo De Marchi.
簡単にその先生の作品の紹介を
Fred Film Radio, sono Dana Knight.
Clémence Ferry-Latour pour Fred Film Radio, en direct du Festival de Cannes.
Fred, the festival experience in 23 languages.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Fred Film Radio's Big Fred Tuesday. This is a new weekly show where we talk about all things cinema with news roundups and lots of interviews. So let me put on my best broadcaster's voice as I am your humble host, the boy with a thorn in his side, Matt Micucci. And let me tell you, do we have a show for you today to get you going on what is traditionally known as the least inspiring day of the week. But first, let's take a quick look at hand-picked major news from the world of cinema, the first of which comes right out of the United States of America. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences of the United States has in fact announced a new initiative for increased equity and inclusion titled Academy Aperture 2025. This includes the creation of a task force of industry leaders in collaboration with the Producers Guild of America to develop and implement new representation and inclusion standards for Oscar eligibility by the 31st of July 2020. The sentiments of the Academy are reflected in a statement released by its CEO, Dawn Hudson, who said, "While the Academy has made strides, we know there is much more work to be done in order to ensure equitable opportunities across the board. The need to address this issue is urgent. To that end, we will amend and continue to examine our rules and procedures to ensure that all voices are heard and celebrated." In addition, the Academy has announced that beginning with the 94th Academy Awards of 2021, the Best Picture category will be set at 10 nominees, rather than a fluctuating number of nominations from year to year. For more information on these recent announcements, you can just visit oscar.org. And let me also tell you about an exciting webinar organized by First Cut Plus. Now, First Cut Plus is a program curated for boosting the competitiveness and marketability of feature films that previously participated in the First Cut Lab, and that is launched this year through a close cooperation with Trieste's When East Meets West and the Carlo Vivari International Film Festival's Eastern Promises Industry Days. The webinar will be live streamed tomorrow on the 17th of June online and will explore alternative strategies and new opportunities for producers from Central and Eastern Europe. Presented in collaboration with Carlo Vivari Eastern Promises and featuring a panel of industry professionals, the webinar will explore such things as the growing market of new digital opportunities for rights holders and address the problem of finding the right platforms for the right kind of exposure. Registrations are of course open, and for more information on that, you can visit firstcutlab.eu. That's firstcutlab.eu. So with all that being said, we are ready to start the show, and let me tell you, we have been working overtime for episode 2 of Big Fred Tuesday. So throughout this episode, you'll be hearing interviews with directors selected for the European Film Promotions Europe Voices of Women in Film initiative. This is an initiative originally launched in 2016 in collaboration with the Sydney Film Festival in Australia, and it recognises new works by some of Europe's most exciting women directors and presents them in a dedicated section of the festival which promotes gender diversity in film. We will also be speaking with the managing director of the TorinoFilmLab about how the current pandemic has been impacting its various activities and prompted them to integrate new processes and new technologies in their old and tried ways. But my friends, this introduction only scratches the surface of what promises to be one heck of an episode of Big Fred Tuesday. So don't go anywhere, because we are just getting started. In 2016, the European Film Promotion, in collaboration with the Sydney Film Festival, launched a new initiative highlighting new works by some of the most exciting European women film directors on the contemporary scene. These films are presented in one of the festival's dedicated sections, promoting gender diversity in film. So I am pleased to be joined by two of the directors of this year's Women in Film selection. Directly from Switzerland, it's Stéphanie Chuat and Véronique Reymond, whose work My Little Sister will be featured in the program. So Stéphanie and Véronique, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hello.
It's a pleasure for me to talk with you. I watched your film. I thought it was terrific, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about it. But first things first, this is kind of the obligatory question, I suppose, because I know that there may be some people listening to this who have not seen the film and are not familiar with it. Would you be able to maybe say a few words about it before we start?
In one sentence, I would say it's the story of a woman who loves her brother more than her husband. But if I expand a bit more, it's a story about two twin brother-sisters, and she's a brilliant author, but she stopped writing because she left Germany. She lives now in Switzerland with her husband, and her brother stayed in Germany, in Berlin, where he's a very famous actor. And he has a cancer, very aggressive cancer, and that's the reason why they go closer to each other again, because she really takes care of him, and she wants him to get better, and also to be able to go back on stage. And she really becomes her, I would say, soulmate. She is her soulmate, but she really wants to support her and to help her to come back to life.
All right. So, I guess I should have started with this question actually, but, we're just improvising here. So I did want to ask you about yourselves and how long you guys have known each other, and how long have you been collaborating together?
We've known each other since childhood, since we are 10 years old. Which is some decades ago now. We were at school together, and we became very, very good friends when we were teenagers. And we were both really wanted to be actresses and were involved into theaters. So we both became actresses and always worked together, even if working with other stage directors. So we started to integrate movies in our own shows, and this really led us to be totally passionate about cinema and movie making. And then we wrote our first feature, and we also did some documentaries, and since 10 years we are really, really active only in films and series and documentaries.
Oh, so you guys are multidisciplinary artists. You work within different forms.
Yes, that's right, yeah. First we were actresses, so yeah.
In My Little Sisters there is a theatrical element, and I did want to ask you in this film about the theatrical elements and its importance. How would you explain that?
Yeah, we have really theater roots, and we come from the stage, we have to say, really. And so it matters a lot to us. When we say an actor is alive only on stage, it's something that we can feel from our guts because we know how it feels to be on stage, and you feel so much more alive sometimes than in your private life or professional real life. And it's very important to us to be close to this feeling, and it's also a kind of un souffle de vie, a breath of life that goes all through our movie, because theater for us, it's the La Matrice, the womb, and we wanted to have one movie talking about this womb, because it's the heart of creation. And even if we are now in the movie field really, and writing movies and directing movies and not acting that much anymore, we have a very strong relationship with actors, and we write characters driven stories also. It's really based on acting and what you can transmit to a human being, to another human being. It's about very much people, and then it's about how you tell a story through feelings. And this is the way we are not coming from, I would say, we are not going from the aesthetic point of view and then to the feelings. We really go from the feeling to then build the story and have an aesthetic point of view then to how we want to see it. It's a kind of process that is very connected to the acting process.
Is there any particular reason why Hamlet, especially in the first part of the film, is such a kind of an important element of the story?
Okay, yeah. Stéphanie said we have seen Hamlet at the Schaubühne, and it's really the part that Alice Guy-Blaché is, comment on dit, incarne, is playing now for so many years, and it's a very, very important role. But Hamlet is a symbol for many actors. It's the role you'd like to play once in your life. It's so difficult and it's so huge. And it's also talking about life and death and revenge. But we don't have revenge in our movie, but we have this connection between life and death. And it's interesting to have this struggle on stage, to have one actor acting Hamlet who is also a struggling character, and we have this man struggling to be on stage, and it's we thought it's a very good play for our movie, actually, even if we had it, to be honest, kind of by chance, because Lars Eidinger was really acting this play when we decided to write this movie. So it's kind of close to reality.
Another thing I found very powerful about the film was the illness of Lars, and just in general, how it was depicted. I believe he has leukemia, right? Have you had any direct experience with that, or did you guys have to live through a similar situation in this sense?
Yes, actually, while we were starting the process of writing the movie, my mother, we got to know she had cancer, lung cancer at stage 4. And during the whole writing process, I was the kind of Lisa to my mother, Lisa character, because I was a carer for her. And I accompanied her till her passing away 10 months later. And Véronique also lost her father while we were writing the movie. But on my personal way, I was really going through accompanying someone to her death, to see her disappear in front of your eyes, because chemotherapy, radiotherapy really make people disappear. It's very impressive, even if they try to cure them. So yes, and there are some scenes that are directly taken from what we experienced, some hospital scenes. But what we tried to do, and I think it's important to say, is that there is this incredible life between the brother and the sister, and that because people who just hear us might think, oh my God, it's a cancer drama, it's dramatic, I don't want to see it. And we really were very attentive not to show too much of the illness in the movie, because Sven is wearing these wigs, and their connection is very alive. And it's important that throughout this process to death, a lot of life is brought in the relationship between the twin.
Yes, there is a lot of hope in the film, and it's also very much connected to creativity. Just to add to what Stéphanie just said, they are connected through creativity. And when you are in a creative process, you are in your present. And when you are in your present, you can just forget about dying. And that's why this relationship is so strong, because when they are together, the twin sister and brother, they just invent stories, invent words.
Okay, so we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere, as we will return with Véronique and Stéphanie on the Big Fred Tuesday. Welcome back, and we are still with Stéphanie Chuat and Véronique Reymond, two of the directors featured in this year's programme of the European Film Promotion's Europe Voices of Women in Film, with their work My Little Sister. And you know, as we've been talking about the film, I wondered whether the central relationship between the brother and the sister in My Little Sister may somehow be related to your own relationship with each other. After all, you did say that you have known each other since you were little and have been collaborating on several creative projects for many years.
Yes, of course. Yes, it's really, it's in this sense, it's a very personal film, because we share, Véronique and I, this incredible friendship since our childhood. It's very rare, very precious, and friendship and professional relationship. So we really have this question, as we are a twin engine process, a duo process. How would it be if one of us would be
twin engine, tu voulais dire?
Sorry, twin engine, yes. And how would it be if one of us would be gone? How would we live? Because we really share a unique thing that I don't share with anyone else. Even if I was creating with other people, it wouldn't be the same complicity, the same references, the same ability to catch things in the air without any words. And that's what is existing in this twin relationship, which is coming from us, basically, clearly.
That is very rare. Very rare. But another thing I wanted to ask you about the character of Lisa, I suppose we could call her the central character of the movie. But I find that the title itself sort of reflects the fact that she is kind of struggling to define herself as anything but her relationship to the other men in the film. I don't know whether that was also sort of an intentional element of the narrative.
Yes, absolutely. It's an intentional element. It's really her story, because the brother, he has a very clear, I would say, storyline. He wants to be on stage. He has a cancer. He has to fight so much in order to be able to be on stage again. And it's a very, I would say, a kind of simple storyline. The sister, it's much more complicated, because she has a family. She has a husband. She has a comfortable life in Switzerland, and she's not happy. And why is that? Is because she quit with her first, I would say, artistic aspiration, artistic skills also. She just quit with this, and she knows she has to go back to what she is deeply. Even if it's difficult, because when you are an artist, you know, you are not in a comfortable position, and socially, and for financial reasons, and for also, I would say, family reasons. You just have to assume that it's not going to be easy at all. But she has to go back to what she is deeply, and her brother helps her, actually. And that's why she's the Schwesterlein in the movie, is because he wants absolutely her to go back to what she was before. And this artist, this amazing writer, and he wants her absolutely to go back to her artistic creativity. And that's her way, that's her journey in our movie.
It is pretty hard to be comfortable as an artist, isn't it?
It's very hard.
Yeah. Before the interview, you told me that you had a documentary out that maybe we'll talk about on a later date more about. But I wondered whether that too influenced your work within fiction films.
Yes, it's very important, because one feeds the other. We really like and love and need to be connected to reality, to what people really experience. And we really notice, I think Véronique also shared this opinion, that going in real life, then when we write characters or when the dialogues, it's really nourishing the writing, sorry.
Yes, I do really think that we want to create very truthful characters, and characters you can identify with, and life is the better way to just feed our creativity. But what is interesting also in our documentary is that we have very strong characters in the documentary, and some people thought we had written the script of the documentary, which is completely wrong, because it's real. But they are so strong, and they have something coming from the fiction. And maybe, the one is feeding really the other.
And just to tell you 2 words about the documentary, we followed during 1 year 5 women over 65 who are alone, meaning they have no more men in their lives, and they feel invisible to society. And so they are really heroines of the everyday life. How do they deal with that? And this movie was really hard to finance, because nobody saw them as potential characters. And what is amazing is that people who see the film now say, what incredible characters you have. So this is, for us, is really great, because they are really everyday life women you wouldn't notice in the street. Their big quality is that they are handling their everyday life like heroines of the quotidien, we say in French.
What is the documentary called?
Les Dames, meaning ladies in English.
I'm looking forward to seeing it, and we need to connect again to talk about it. I feel it's a very interesting one.
With pleasure.
Okay, so we have actually exceeded the time that I promised for this interview, so I am aware of that. But I want to end it in kind of a, I don't know, I feel a symbolic way too, because this interview is sort of being conducted in the context of women in film. You know, I would love for you to maybe share the name of a woman filmmaker who you feel inspires you or has influenced you and in your work, in your art, in your personal life. But it doesn't even have to be a famous name, or it can even be someone we may not be familiar with.
But there is a movie directed by a woman that I admire, and it's Lazzaro Felice from Alice Guy-Blaché. I love her sensitivity, and she's so clever and brilliant, and this movie is just amazing. It's a parable, I would say.
Parable, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so human and clever, and well, yeah, it's a beautiful movie.
I would say Jane Campion, because really I think her movies are just amazing, and the way she is in society, the way she is not playing seduction games, she's really herself. I really admire her a lot. And also Agnès Varda, who has been being in such a masculine world, and who is doing such an original work and so personal, and always following her own path. I admire women who follow their own path in this very masculine and hard and sexist sometimes world.
Do you think that the situation is getting better?
It's getting better because men have to do with women, because of the Me Too, because everything. I would just like that they wish, and not that they have to. But I feel it's a bit changing, yes. And I hope it will last.
Yeah. Me too. That's not a pun, but that pun not intended.
But I have to add that we love to work with men, Stéphanie and I, and we are very used to work with men and collaborate with men. And I like so much the relationship between men and women. And I want a world with a real balance between men and women, and not a world led by women only, or a world led by men only. It's really about connecting with each other, and it's difficult, but I really hope we can make it once.
Yeah, and of course we're talking in binary gender terms, but there are other genders, and we're respectful of all genders. But don't you find that men are just more obsessed with power, just naturally?
Yes, because they have the power since ever. So it's normal for them to have it. I mean, look at the world. But
I don't want to get carried away with this, because I really could, but we better stop it here. But
yeah, it's very subtle, but I have to say it's very subtle still. The whole thing.
What is subtle?
It's just the power and this, and it's much more complicated, the whole thing.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You are listening to Fred Film Radio's Big Fred Tuesday, and we thank you for it. In case you missed it, we were speaking earlier with Stéphanie Chuat and Véronique Reymond, who are two of the filmmakers part of the European Film Promotion's Europe Voices of Women in Film programme, presented in collaboration with the Sydney Film Festival, therefore naturally screened as part of the Sydney Film Festival, which is currently taking place, having started on the 10th and continuing through the 21st of June. Like many film festivals around the world, the Sydney Film Festival has had to move its edition for this year online in response to the global pandemic, and our very own Cristiana Palmieri actually interviewed festival director Nashen Moodley about the challenges of this undertaking and much more. Let's take a listen to a clip from the interview.
It's really, really a pleasure to catch up with you again this year.
It's great to speak to you again.
Well, this particular year is it's a different type of Sydney Film Festival, I guess. It's the 67th edition. And yes, it's quite unique and exceptional, because from the 10th to the 21st of June, the festival will go virtual for the very first time. And I have to say that I know that we are living in very unprecedented times, and it could sound a bit weird saying that it's fabulous news for the festival aficionados that the festival is going ahead virtual, because we were very worried about a potential gap year because of this global pandemic. So when we heard the news that the festival would go ahead, was really, really fabulous news for us. So take us through to the decision to have a virtual edition of the festival. It must have been quite challenging back in March when you were forced to cancel the festival.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you very much for your kind words. And it's been such a wonderful response to this virtual festival. And I think so many people have written to us and said that even though we can't have a festival in cinemas this year, that they're really delighted that we're going ahead and there's going to be a 67th Sydney Film Festival. Of course, it was a really difficult decision to not present a festival in cinemas this year in the way that we are accustomed to. It was, of course, the first time in the 66-year history of the Sydney Film Festival that an edition would not happen in cinemas. So it was a traumatic decision in many ways, and things happened so quickly and so drastically. We were forced into the decision. There was no other possibility. But as soon as we made that decision not to present the Sydney Film Festival in cinemas this year, we were determined at the same time to work on ways in which we could continue to support the industry, continue to bring attention to films that we love, and also to maintain the connection with our audience. We have a very loyal, very enthusiastic audience for the festival, and we wanted to maintain the connection with this audience. Now, at the time, we didn't know exactly how we would do that. We have never done an online festival before, of course, and there had to be quite a lot of research and looking at ways in which first we could technically make it possible in a secure way, and then, of course, move to looking at what films we could present in this festival.
Well, I think that, must have been a very, very difficult decision, also in terms of logistics, as you said, and how to come up with a plan B in the midst of a global pandemic.
That's right. And, there were many implications. And of course, all arts organizations around the world are experiencing severe economic stress. It was very unclear what would happen. Yes, it was extremely difficult. There's no getting around it. It was extremely difficult. We were more fortunate than many film festivals, for instance, because we were able to take that decision to cancel some months before the festival was due to start.
Yeah.
Whereas, many festivals were affected in a way where within days of their starting point, they were forced to cancel. Some festivals were forced to cancel even in the middle of their festival, which is far more devastating in many ways, including financially. So it's, let's say, a blessing in disguise that we were forced to cancel at a time when there's never a convenient time to cancel, but it was a time less convenient than others. Or more convenient than others, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we are here now to celebrate the fact that the virtual edition will go ahead. Actually, the program was launched yesterday, and the program presents Australian documentaries, short films, along with the screenability program and the very well received Europe Voices of Women in Films. So I assume, reading the press release, that this is like a few components of the original lineup. Am I right?
Yes, that's right. These are sections that we present at the festival each year, and the reasoning was that we wanted to support the Australian film industry through the awards we present each year, the Documentary Australia Foundation Award for Australian Documentary and the Dendy Awards for Australian Short Films. Screenability is a program that we've been doing in recent years that puts the spotlight on filmmakers with disability. And of course, the Europe Voices of Women in Film program is something we've done for 5 years now, celebrating European women directors. And we wanted to maintain these sections, and it was not that we'd already finalized the program of the festival. we were about 50% done with the programming of the festival, but hadn't actually finalized the selection for these sections. So there was a period where we were researching what to do in terms of what platform to use for any kind of online festival, at the same time working on the selection, but not knowing whether everything would come to fruition and everything would work out.
Yeah. Yeah, so it must have been a difficult decision within a difficult decision.
That's right, yes. Yes, it's very complicated. It's very complicated. I think it's, this has not happened before.
Yeah.
And it's not just a matter of festivals figuring out what to do. It's about filmmakers and producers and distributors and sales agents also working out what's best to do. And in many cases, I think there are films that have decided not to go online, that will wait for theaters to reopen, that will wait for festivals to reopen and be in cinemas. So, yes, I think we're still in a period of flux.
So that was just a clip of the full interview with Nashen Moodley. And to listen to the full interview, all you have to do is visit fred.fm/UK. That's fred.fm/UK. The TorinoFilmLab is a year-round film laboratory that supports talent from all over the world through training, development, production and distribution and funding activities. The lab is linked to the annual Torino Film Festival and the National Museum of Cinema in Turin, Italy, as well as some of the main film institutions established in Turin and the Piedmont region. Here to tell us more about it, as well as how the Torino Film Lab has adapted and responded to the current global pandemic, Mercedes Fernandez Alonso, Managing Director of the Torino Film Lab. Mercedes, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks to you for inviting me. I am very happy to be here.
I gave a brief introduction to the various things that the Torino Film Lab does. Is it fair to say that its main fields of intervention are training, development, production and distribution funding? I mean, is that correct?
That's very correct. Basically, the idea of Torino Film Lab is putting together activities that usually are separated. So very often you have laboratories where you can develop the script and develop the project, or you have funds that support financially your film or your TV series. But we wanted to offer a space where all these pieces could come together. So let's say the specificity of Torino Film Lab is that you can go through the whole process of developing and producing and distributing a film together with us. So you could arrive, for example, with an idea, you could apply to our program Script Lab, and if selected, you develop the script with us during 1 year. At the end of this year, we give you, a filmmaker, the possibility to present this script to the international film industry during a co-production market that takes place in November in Torino, and it's called the Meeting Event. But after this work of script development, you could apply for a second step, which is another program which is called Feature Lab, where you still work on the script, but you also work on all the aspects related to the production of the film. And in fact, in this program, we welcome teams of writers, directors, and producers, because we approach the project as a whole, not only the writing part, but also all the production sides of it. Again, it's 1 year program with a final presentation during the co-production market in November. And on that occasion, during the co-production market, the projects that participated in this program are also candidates to our production awards, which is a financial support we assign awards between 40,000 and 50,000 euros to support the production of some selected films. On top of this, we also have a fund that supports the distribution of films that implement innovative strategies to engage their audiences. This is our Audience Design Fund, and it's related to the concept of audience design. This is a concept that we have developed during the last years in TorinoFilmLab. And what is it? Basically, it's the idea that you need to engage your audience since the early stage of your project. So the strategies to engage your audience are developed together with your story, and they are very related. So the idea is designing these audience engagement strategies starting from the content of your film. So that's why we decided to create this fund that supports projects that implement this kind of strategies. And it's not only a fund, we also accompany the projects with some training. We work with the supported projects and with teams of audience designers that help the teams to design and to implement these strategies. So you are totally right. The TorinoFilmLab works on the three areas you mentioned. We develop projects, and while we develop the projects, we train the professionals because they get skills. They get skills on how to write a script, how to develop a project. And last, also, we fund the production and the distribution of the films.
And so there's a lot to talk about, and hopefully we're going to try and talk about a lot of all of that. But let's get back to the development side of things. And I guess what I really wanted to make sure that I asked you is, let's say for the script lab or feature lab and series lab as well, who exactly is eligible for participation in these labs? And what is the selection process like?
So for a script lab is addressed to feature film projects that are at an early stage of development. So they apply with a treatment. And it's open to all the nations in the world. So there is not any limitation on terms of nationality, on terms of genre, on terms of age. Is totally open, and the selection that we do is based on artistic criteria. So we look at the quality of the project that we receive. For Feature Lab, it's again open to all nations, all ages, all genres. There are two different respects. Script Lab. One, Feature Lab, is addressed to feature film projects at an advanced stage of development. So projects that already have a producer attached, already have a script, and specifically Feature Lab is focused on first and second feature films. So it's focused on emerging filmmakers. And last, Series Lab, like Script Lab, is focused on the writing process. So again, we work with teams of writers and producers who are developing a TV series, and they are at an early stage. So they apply with a concept. And during the program, what we do with them is that we develop the treatment of the pilot and the mini Bible of the series. In the case of Series Lab, we decided to focus on European TV series because this program was born with the idea of supporting European professionals and supporting an European voice in the field of TV series. So this is a difference between Series Lab and the other two programs. Series Lab, we specifically wanted to develop an European voice in the field of TV series.
If I was to ask you for a couple of titles of movies that particularly testify to the success and stature of the Torino Film Lab, what are the first titles that come to your head?
Okay, so the very first that comes to my mind is Touch Me Not by Adina Pintilli, that won the Golden Bear at the Berlinale, and The Heiresses that won in the same year the Silver Bear. So these are two titles that come to my mind immediately, but actually the list of films that travel in the main international festivals is quite long. Just to tell you the last one, we have a film selected in Cannes this year, which is Sweat, the Polish-Swedish co-production. The film is directed by Magnus von Horn. So, of course, we are really, until today, 113 films have been produced in TorinoFilmLab, and we are very proud of their career and their presence in the film festivals.
I know for sure that one of the first films that I think about is The Lunchbox from a few years ago.
Yes.
That was a great film. We're going to take a break for now, but we'll be back for our second part of the interview, during which we will discuss some of the ways in which the Torino Film Lab has responded to the challenges posed by the current global pandemic. So stay tuned. And we're back. We're talking with Mercedes Fernandez Alonso, who is the managing director of the Torino Film Lab. And in the first part of our interview, we gave a pretty comprehensive overview of the many activities of this international film laboratory. So now it's time to talk about the present. Now, naturally, the film world has had to face huge challenges as a result of the health emergency. So, Mercedes, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel the global pandemic has affected the Torino Film Lab, and what are some of the ways in which it has responded to it?
I have to say that the health emergency has had a role in TorinoFilmLab as an accelerator, because we had been discussing internally in TorinoFilmLab during the last years how we would like to start a branch of TorinoFilmLab that works online. But then we were always, busy with other things. So it was a discussion, but it was not concrete yet. So, this pandemic just pushed us to accelerate this process. So when the lockdown arrived to Italy, which was one of the maybe the first nation in Europe to start the lockdown, we had several workshops that we were about to start. So we had to be very quick and to transform these workshops to an online format, which is not so automatic because it's not like putting the same program on a Zoom version, but you really need to rethink the format of things, because you need in some way to balance some problems that you can find on the online. For example, it's more difficult to create a group because our methodology is all based on group working. Our filmmakers, our participants, they work in group with the other participants because we believe in this exchange. So we had to rethink all the formats, and we managed to do it on time. So at the moment, all our programs are online until the autumn. We had the first session of a Script Lab in April online, and we have the second session now in June. Feature Lab, we have just finished the first workshop in the last days that took place last week. And now we are thinking about our strategy in autumn. So we are now in the process to decide if we can do some activities offline, or if we need to continue everything online. In September, we will also have the workshops related to the Audience Design Fund that I spoke about some minutes ago, and those workshops will be online for sure. We are still in the process to decide what we will do for our co-production market in November. In any case, the online will be integrated, but still we need to see if it will be totally online or not. So as the landscape changes quite quickly, we are still waiting a little bit before making a final decision. So what I can say about the online, I can say that of course it will never replace the meetings in person, and I think that's clear for the whole industry. But I think that it's also clear that has a lot of advantages and that it can be integrated in the offline formats. And we will do it next year and the years to come for several reasons. First, because we think it's also necessary to train professionals to work on distance, because very often the teams of producers, writers, and directors cannot meet in person very often because they live in different nations, they travel a lot, etc. So learning to have a work process online is also important. We think that there is also a theme, which is the environment and the need that the audiovisual industry, but as all industries, we will need to be greener in the future. And among other things, this may mean to travel less. So also to assess when it is necessary to travel, when maybe it's not so necessary. So nobody's saying that we will not travel, but maybe we can, tune it a little bit. So on that sense, we think that the online can be a great help. And it allows also some flexibility that you don't have when you need to meet in person. You can involve people who could not travel if the meeting would be offline. Maybe they can't travel because they are busy, or maybe also for economical reasons. So you can also speak to filmmakers who have not the resources to travel to different places, to the festivals and to the workshops. So for all these reasons, we think that in any case, the online format needs to be integrated. Also, even when this health emergency will be at our backs.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that expansive answer. I feel like that really says a lot, and I love that point about the environment as well. I think it is it's almost a positive thing that can come out of this moment.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's of course it's a hard time for the entire world, but at the same time, I mean, I think what we can do in a moment like this is try to find the changes, the positive changes that we can bring to the table.
Absolutely. And we've actually arrived to the end of our interview, of the time that I promised for the interview. But I do have one final question, and it's related to something that you actually mentioned earlier, the TFL Audience Design Fund. Because although we have sort of focused on the film development side of things, earlier on we mentioned that this is a thing that TorinoFilmLab also follows, is audience development. And I just wanted to ask you, very simply, do you expect that the film world will be taking a hit in terms of audience development as a result of the pandemic?
That's really a very interesting question. I think this is a very interesting moment because for sure we will need to ask a lot of questions in this moment, because even when the cinemas will reopen gradually in all the nations, we don't know how many people will go to the cinemas. Also, which kind of stories the people want to hear in this moment. What can be the role of the cinema in the storytelling of this moment? So I think it's an interesting question. I really don't have an answer for it. I think that we are now in the moment of the research, and I am very curious. It's a moment for the industry to reshape things, to rethink. So I think that it can be an opportunity to also engage the audiences in different ways, and we will have to. So let's see what this brings.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mercedes. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thanks to you.
Sad news, as we learnt that last week on the 8th of June, French-Belgian film director Marion Ansel passed away. Having started in cinema as an actress, she later grew into a film director and made such movies as Dust, which was awarded the Silver Lion at the Venice Film Festival in 1985, Il Maestro, which won the Audience Award at San Sebastian in 1990, and Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, which was selected for the Golden Palm competition at the Cannes Film Festival in 1995. I actually had the opportunity to meet her earlier this year at the International Film Festival Rotterdam, where she was presenting her latest film, There Was a Little Ship, which was autobiographical and constructed around her own memories, and may poetically in fact be seen as a swan song. So we remember her now by playing that interview from the Fred Archives. Fred Film Radio, I'm Matt Micucci from the 2020 International Film Festival Rotterdam, and I'm in good company today because I'm very pleased to be introducing to you, good listeners, filmmaker Marion Ansel. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello.
Doing numerous things here at the festival, but I think that we will be focusing in particular on a new film that you're presenting here, and it's called, let me make sure, There Was a Little Ship. Would you like to say the original title? I wouldn't dare to test my pronunciation.
In French, it's Il était un petit navire, and I think everybody knows this song. Il était un petit navire, because this song is translated in so many languages with the same melody.
I'm actually not familiar with it. No, I wasn't familiar with it. What's the meaning behind this mystery?
It's a boat. It's a little boat that goes on sea. And they have a crew, and they fish, and then there is no fish, and they are far away on the sea, and suddenly there is nothing to eat anymore. So they decide that they are going to eat one of the crew members, and then they take I don't know how you say, whatever, and it is of course the youngest one that they are going to decide to eat, but then it doesn't really happen.
No, but it somehow reflects the life story that you tell in this film of yours, right?
Yes and no.
No, you didn't get it. Nobody is eating.
Nobody is eating. Nobody in my life. But no, it's just because when we were kids, and we were living. I was born in Marseille. And so very close to the sea, going every morning to the beach and seeing the sea. And I, with my sisters, my two sisters, we were always singing that Il était un petit, when we were going to the beach and looking at the boats, and so that's why I called the film Il était un petit navire.
And, of course, if we were to introduce the film, I suppose one of the things that we should say is that you filmed this over the course of 2 months. Is that correct?
No. It took longer because... Yeah. Because we didn't shoot every day. We shot in different locations, like in Paris, in Antwerp, in Marseille, and in New York, in South Devon in England, whatever. but depending also a little bit on the season.
Yeah, it would probably be more right to say that perhaps the period of the 2 months is more related to the time during which you were recovering from
Yeah, that's true. Because also in this film, the little stories that I tell about my life are interrupted by sequences in a hospital, and in a hospital room and a long corridor of the hospital, because I had to stay. I had a big operation, and I had to stay two months in that hospital. But I was not suffering. I had no pain or whatever. I just had to stay there, and so I had 2 months to dream and to remember all kinds of events of my life that started when I was born in 1949 and ended at that hospital. That's about 5 years ago. And then once I got out of the hospital, in fact, I had the whole script play ready in my head. And then I wrote it in 15 days. You know, I didn't make the film in 15 days, but I wrote the letters, because it's off voice in the film. I am telling the stories, and it was already ready in my head, and I just had to put it up, write it down.
But is this the story of your life then, or is it somewhat...
It's the story of my life.
Yeah. None of it is imagined for the purpose of cinema.
No, maybe in your memories or remembrance, when they are memories from a long time ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, maybe you think, yes, it was like that, but maybe your memory is transforming things, making them more beautiful or making them harsher than they really were. That I don't know. But that's what makes it interesting, I guess.
Would you consider yourself a nostalgic person?
No, I don't think I regret. I have nostalgia. No, I don't think so.
Right. And is it at all difficult to revisit some of these memories, or do you find it easy in your everyday life to be thinking about days past?
No, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun, but for instance, you asking, is this all reality, or I have sisters, many sisters, okay, and with more or less the same age, you know, we have like 1 year difference or 2 year difference, so we're very close. And they saw the film. Of course, it's my little bubbles and my little story, but the beginning in Marseille is our story. In Antwerp, it's our story. And they said, okay, you know, we like the film, you made a beautiful film. But of course, Mariam, it's your memory, because I don't have at all the same feeling of how happy I was in Marseille, or how unhappy I was, or the parents' divorce. They had other interpretation than mine, but that's normal, because it's mine. Nobody can have the same, you know.
What about your time in America then? What was it rethinking of those days, perhaps with a more contemporary viewpoint?
That was. I stayed there 1 year in New York, more or less 1 year, and it was hard, because I was trying really, really hard. I was already an actress, but a theater actress in Brussels, and but I wanted to make it to cinema, Los Angeles, New York, whatever, and it was very, very difficult to get parts, and I go to casting, and no, it was not really fun, and I had very, very, very little money to live, so I was doing all kind of jobs.
You talk about your boyfriend or fiance, whatever we want to call it at the time, also being into drugs and then having a few encounters with producers who would try to take advantage of it.
Yes.
Not fun.
No, and not really, not so much fun. After 1 year, I was fed up with it. I thought, okay, leave that bullshit crap of, having to go to bed with Dean Martin or something to get a part, or say, come on, what is this? Back home. But then I went to Paris, and I lived for 9 years or 10 years in Paris.
Right.
Yeah, and that was a little bit more easy.
Hey, and on the subject of memories, do you find that you think about more and more as time goes by, memories, that you spend more time thinking about the past as time goes by?
Not especially. I think it was really because I was stuck in that hospital, and that my mind had nothing else to do than just souvenirs. But in my normal life, as you see, I'm busy all the time. So, and I read a lot, and I work, and I produce, and I am a grandmother, and I'm taking care of my grandchild, and so I don't have that. It's no more the moment for.
I like the idea of some episodes of the Big Fred Tuesday having a driving concept. And as this has been one of the dominant themes of the show so far, I wanted to take a few moments to tell you about a remarkable woman in film, Alice Guy, or Alice Guy-Blaché, who was a pioneer of the French and American film industries. She was born in Paris in 1873 and is generally acknowledged as the first woman director to film a narrative story. In fact, many have argued that from 1896 to 1906, she may have been the only woman film director in the world. She began her career in film as a secretary to Léon Gaumont and made her first film in 1896. After becoming Gaumont's head of production, she directed most of the company's movies. Now, most of them are presumed lost. However, her style is said to have developed greatly throughout these prolific, formative years. She also progressively became more ambitious as the years went on, and many quote her 1906 30-minute film, The Birth, the Life and the Death of Christ, as her most notable work from this time due to its incredible scale for the time, as it featured 25 sets as well as numerous exterior locations and over 300 extras. A year later, she married Herbert Blaché, who was 9 years her junior, and the two moved to New York after he was appointed as the production manager for Gaumont's operations in the United States. For 3 years, she focused on being a wife and a mother, but returned to filmmaking, becoming the first woman to head her own studio, which she founded in Fort Lee, New Jersey, a location regarded as the birthplace of American cinema. She named her studio the Solex Company, and interestingly, it displayed a large sign outside its doors that read, "Be Natural." It was during the Solex years that she directed arguably her most famous work, Falling Leaves from 1912, a melodrama featuring one of her most recurring themes, the child hero, which at the time was quite a popular theme in American cinema, during a period in which the industry attempted an uplift to attract a more middle-class audience. Several misfortunes followed: a divorce from her husband, who left her to pursue a career in Hollywood, and the Spanish flu pandemic of 1919 that almost killed her. That same year, she actually directed her last film, Tarnished Fortunes, which sadly is presumed lost. Economic troubles led to her demise in 1921, and she filed for bankruptcy and auctioned off her studio. Although she lived to be 94 years old, she never directed a film again. Her death in 1968 went largely unreported. Now, despite the fact that she shot narrative films before Georges Méliès, who is considered the father of fictional cinema, her role in film history was completely forgotten. That was until her own memoirs were published in 1976. In recent years, her legend has experienced somewhat of a resurgence thanks to the work of film scholars and preservationists, as well as the increased push for equality brought on by the Me Too movement. Manola Dargis wrote on the New York Times in 2019, just last year, "Like other trailblazing women from cinema's formative years, Blaché has been discovered somewhat overlooked and rediscovered anew. Only now, largely because of the feminist film scholars who are writing women back into history, does her place seem more secure." The Marché du Film, the market of the Cannes Film Festival, defines itself as the annual rendezvous for professionals across all walks of the global film industry. This year, it will take place online from the 22nd of June to the 26th of June, in response, of course, to the current global pandemic. This past week, Fred Film Radio's very own Angelo Acerbi interviewed the Cannes Film Market's director, Jerome Paillard, to find out more about it. And here's a clip from their conversation.
So I wanted to ask firstly, when you decided to go online, which were your main concerns and your goals? What would you like to achieve?
Actually, it came in two steps. Our goals was only that at the beginning, you know that the festival was thinking to be postponed in June. And of course, we were moving with the festival, but we realized that certainly even in June, nobody will be able to come in Cannes. And then we started at the beginning to say, okay, how can we help people who will not be able to travel to still participate to the event and do business? And of course, after a few weeks, we understood that the festival will not happen at all. And then we decided to run just the virtual part of what we were planning. And of course, the goal is that we get many calls and requests from all the industry, from the distributors, from the sales agents, from the institutions, from the producers, saying that they really need an event during the first part of the year. And they were needing an event before the summer, before the big gap of the summer, and nobody knew at that time, and even now it's difficult to know exactly what will happen at fall. Mm-hmm. So really the challenge was to say, okay, how can we help the industry to do maybe not all the business, of course, that they will have done in Cannes, but at least to be able to show their films, to do some sales, to present some further projects, to find for distributors some project to distributors, and for producers to be able to find partners for their ongoing projects. So that was really the goal.
How did the philosophy of the market change for this edition online? If it did change, maybe it didn't.
We tried actually not to change too much the philosophy, I don't know, but at least the experience, because I think the film industry is not necessarily ready to jump in a kind of second life event with clones, and so we try to keep as far as possible the marks, the ground of the Cannes experience, and that means that basically the new platform we are finishing now will look a little bit like Cannes, like arriving in Cannes, finding some cinemas, finding a palais with some booths, finding a village with institutions, finding programs, finding Le Petit Majestic where you can do some networking.
How is it actually built up? How is it made? How is it structured, this online market this year?
Again, we try to keep the same workflow than usual. So before the market, people prepare the market, and to prepare their market, they use tools like Cinendo, like the trades, like the mailing they receive from the sales agents, and so we keep the same. So we keep the tools, and we basically build an integration of all the different tools, that new platform called marchedufilm.online, where everything will be integrated, but not everything will be provided by that platform. It's just where people will be able to walk. The important point we had also to solve was the question of the time zones. Of course, the big difference, one of the big differences, there are many differences, but one of the big differences is that not everyone will be in the same place and not in the same time. So for the screenings, we decided that we will offer to every buyer, every distributors, everywhere in the world, screenings on their own time zone. So if a film is set to start at 10 a.m., it will start at 10 a.m. everywhere, anywhere you are in your local time. So that means that, of course, the screening will be repeated during all the day. But for the buyers, it will be much easier. They just have to check the program, the schedule, and they say, oh, there is a film at 2 p.m. I like to that. At 2 p.m., I connect. Yeah. And if I'm in Australia or in China or in Europe or in the US or in Argentina, it will be at the same. It will be at 2 p.m.
Yeah, I mean, as if they were in Cannes, basically.
Exactly.
It's the same thing, the same feeling.
It's a little bit more difficult, of course, for the live events, for the conferences, for some presentations, for some pitch sessions, and of course, all the meetings, the speed meetings, the individual meetings, the networking events. Then, of course, we need to have everyone at the same time, really connecting. So actually, for instance, the Producers Network, the program we have for producers, instead of just having one breakfast in the morning, we will have 2 times during the day, less tables. So we will have 5 or 6 tables in the morning and in the afternoon. And then we will be able to serve a meeting between Europe and Asia and Europe in America. It will be more difficult, of course, to organize events between Asia and the US.
Yeah, of course.
To listen to the full interview, all you have to do is check out fred.fm/UK. Again, that's fred.fm/UK. You're listening to the Big Fred Tuesday, and for this section of the program, we are joined by Sandra Beerens, director of They Call Me Babu. Now, Sandra is one of the women directors selected as part of the European Film Promotion's Europe Voices of Women in Film, presented in collaboration with the Sydney Film Festival. So it's an honor to have her with us. Sandra, welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt.
It's a pleasure for me to talk with you. I watched the film and I thought it was very powerful. Just so that we don't leave any of our listeners out who may not be familiar with the film, I was wondering whether you'd like to say a few words to introduce it a little bit.
Well, it's about an Indonesian nanny, and the film is between 1939 till 1949, so it's like 10 years. And in this period, there's going on a lot. So first, from 1939 till 1942, it was a former colony of the Netherlands, the former Dutch East Indies. Then there was the Japanese occupation of Indonesia, so then the Japanese are the rulers. And then after the capitulation, the Indonesian independence fight was going on. And I focused on this nanny. They were called by the Dutch babus. And she's working for a Dutch family. There were, I think, almost all Dutch families had an Indonesian nanny. And she's very important for me. And the strange thing is, I think she's very important in the history, but you cannot read or find anything, at least when I started, about this great woman. So that's how I started this movie.
I was wondering actually about that and whether you felt, how much do you feel people know nowadays about babus?
Well, I think most people don't know anything about it. And I think the older people in the Netherlands, especially the Dutch Indonesian people, they know about it. And most of them are raised by an Indonesian nanny. But for the younger generations, most of them don't. And sometimes they just hear from their parents or their grandparents about it. And I think people outside the Netherlands, I think especially former European countries who also had colonies, I think they know this element of like growing up by nannies from colonized land, so like France and Britain. But this special thing in the former Dutch East Indies was especially for the Netherlands.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand you yourself are part Indonesian?
Yes, I am. My mom is from Semarang, that's from the island Java. And so she told me a lot of stories about her babu. And, in my mind, there were like wonderful angel-like people, mothers, and they were like 24 hours a day. They were busy with these kids. And later on, I heard a lot of stories about people who were raised by these baboos. And that was why I wondered, I hear these stories, but I don't read anything about them.
So you did have personal reasons for wanting to explore their story.
Yeah, I did. And I really, because, that they, in these times when, for me, it's important that different cultures are connected. And because I have two cultures, my father is from the Netherlands, so I'm Dutch Indonesian. And for a long time in Indonesia, they called it Indo. And they say, you're a half-blood. And now I think I'm not half-blood, I'm double-blood. So, I have this double luggage and I'm happy with it. And in this nannies, these baboos, they were really the bridge between one culture and the other. So they are the bridge between the Dutch culture, from the Dutch families in the former colony. But because she belongs to the Indonesian people and the Indonesian culture, she was in a very natural way the bridge between two cultures. And it came just, I think, in the most powerful way that you can be introduced to another culture by food and by little habits like how you wash yourself and how you powder yourself and little songs and, things like that.
Yeah, and I feel like this film seems more relevant than ever now with all the protests currently happening. I mean, would it be right to say that this film does have a lot to do with history, but also perspective?
Yes. For me, it was very important that I focused on her perspective and on the perspective of a young Indonesian woman without any power. Because, she's living there and what I said before, like there are these three periods. The power play is always coming from men above. And they were putting flags and they say, well, now it is like this or now it is like this and these are the rules. And she's just, a young woman without any power and also not with the knowledge that we have today with internet and all these kind of things. So she's just confronted with reality and with the men who are in power. So I think it's very important. And there are a lot of books and also films about this period in the Dutch history, but they're always from the perspective mostly of white male. And so I really think it's important to have her perspective heard. And most of them are died by now, so they don't have the power and the voice to do that. So I felt the urge to do that for them.
But is it difficult to understand that perspective when, like you said, there's such little material specifically on them, and also because time has passed?
Yeah, well, I started with, as I said, with the stories of my mom, and then I interviewed people from her generation who were raised by baboos, and then I continued and I interviewed former baboos, but also children of the baboos and grandchildren of the baboos. And I did that in the Netherlands because after the war there were a lot of baboos. They come here and they stayed here because they couldn't go back. But I also interviewed in Indonesia, and there were a lot of investigations from anthropological scientists, and they focused on oral history. So I had in the end, like a lot of stories from baboos. And then I said, well, I knew that in that time, especially the more wealthy Dutch families, they do have a camera, and they made films for the people back home to show them, like, so this is our life here, and this is our house, and this is our garden, and these are our servants. And I knew that when there was a kid, there always was a babu. So I was looking at archive material, and we have like 2 wonderful big archives in the Netherlands, Eye and Sound and Vision. And I started with Eye because they have a lot of home movies from this time made by these Dutch families. So I knew there must be a babu in this material. But, you know, there was not like, how you say it, a word that I could just type on and then there was all about babus. The word wasn't existing. So it was just family life, or sometimes it said something about daily life and there is like a gardener or something. So I looked for it, and for a long time I couldn't find anything, because the moment I saw the children, and they were most of the time in the middle of the screen, and the moment this kid was walking, they followed the kid, but not the babu who was nearby. And then, you know, sometimes in the back of the screening, I saw something moving. And then every time that the child was moving, I saw a moving in the bushes. So I thought there must be somebody. And then I just looked and looked for details. And then I saw a babu in the backyard, and she was ready to run to this kid in the case he was falling. And then when I was aware of that, I also saw sometimes a hand from outside the screen feeding this kid, or sometimes just a scarf in which they are carrying the kids. So that was the start of my research.
We'll be back with the second part of the interview with Sandra Beerens, so stay tuned for more. Welcome back, and I'm here with Sandra Beerens, one of the women directors, part of this year's Europe Voices of Women in Film programme presented by the European Film Promotion in collaboration with the Sydney Film Festival. And we've been talking about her film, They Call Me Babu. And the film really makes a lot of use of archive documentary. And I was wondering about how long it took you to gather all the material that you needed for the movie, and also just a little about the process. Did it take you very long?
Yes, it did take me very long. I think, well, from the start till the premiere, I think it was like 5 years. And I saw like 500 films. And in this film, there are 1,001 shots from 179 films. And they're not all home movies. Because I also was looking for films with which I could tell something about her life, and also her life outside her being a nanny, because the moment the Dutch family was in the Japanese camps, she was on her own. So there were no home movies made with her in the picture. So there were also like films from companies of rice and tea and kapok, and also anthropological films. So I saw a lot of films. I just make a list of it by every second. And sometimes suddenly, you know, it was only in the last 10 seconds, then suddenly I found something and I thought, I'm not sure where I can use it, but this is such beautiful material. I wrote it down, and even when I was editing, then, you know, sometimes, because I went in the edit with all these films and all the stories in the back of my head, and I just make a kind of, storyline. And I decided, I had to make the decision that I heard so many beautiful stories, and I couldn't, there were like, I found like, 2 or 3 babus who are still living, but they were not able to tell a lot in front of the camera. And also there were just, 1 little or 2 little stories. And I had such an amazing, so many stories that I thought, you know, I want to find a way to tell most of the stories. And so I decided I make one character, and she's based on all these stories. So I can use a lot of these stories in this storyline. But when I was in the edit, and we edited for like 4 months, I just said, I had a wonderful editor, Ruben van der Hammen. And I just said, okay, I have an idea like this scene. I think we can use like this and this and this material. And then we loaded it. And sometimes for one scene, I had like 30 films and we looked at it together. And I said, well, I'm looking for a scene like this or a scene like that. And then we make a scene. And then I did the voiceover myself, but I did it in Dutch. And then the moment we had a kind of scene and a kind of rhythm, then I said, okay, now is the moment I will translate it. And I had a translator and I choose the language, not the Indonesian Bahasa nowadays, because that was made after 1949, after Indonesia was independent. Because Sukarno said then, there were all these islands and every part of the island had its own language. So we need to be one land. So we need to have one language. But in the time this film is playing, it's played on Java. And every part had another language. And also you had high Javanese and low Javanese. Because the adult, so they talk in another, they talk in another way. And also older people talk in another way to people who are younger. So it's very different. But on the street and on the pasar is the Indonesian name for market. Everybody talks in a street language, and it's called Pasar Malays. It's from Malaysia. So she was translating it into that language. And one of the big things that was a challenge was that, when I decided to have this voiceover, I didn't want to have talking all the time. So I want to say as much as possible in as little words as possible. So I used a lot of adjectives like he's an old, rich Chinese man. But you can't do that in Indonesia. They don't have adverbs like that. So it is like, he's a man, he's Chinese, he's old, and he's rich. So, it was 5 times longer than I planned. So we had a lot of fun trying to find a sentence that makes sense and had the heart of the thing that I wanted to tell.
It's interesting how language sort of shapes cultures.
Yes. It is.
And also, on top of the voiceover, then you've got sound enhancing the images and music, of course.
Yes, because I had a wonderful actress who did this voiceover. And from the beginning, the whole crew I worked with, they are with me from the beginning. So even when I don't have any money or no broadcaster or producer, I asked them to work with me, and that was great. It was also challenging for them because I didn't know exactly where I was going, because I wanted their input used it as big as possible, because they're all experienced in their own discipline. So I didn't want to throw anything away. So I knew from the beginning that the sound design and the music and the voice, they were like a kind of orchestra. So they really they need to be in a balance. The composer, he made music for us because we said we really want to compose with your music. We didn't want to use a lot of temp music. Temp music means you are using music that is made for somebody else's movie or somebody else's orchestra, and it's not meant for that specifically scene that you need. But the thing is that when you're using it for a long time, your ears are kind of used to it. And then it can be, especially when the composer is coming in late, that you say to the composer, and that is not at all creative, okay, I make this film and we use this music and I want you to compose something a little bit like that. And then it's always, it's secondhand or third hand. It's not creative. But now that he made these things for us, it meant also that sometimes he made just wonderful music, but we couldn't use it because of the voice and the sound design. So it was constantly balancing between the image, the sound design, the voice, and the music. But everybody was really working together. So yeah, I was lucky that I had this wonderful crew.
Well, Sandra, we are out of time, but it was a pleasure talking.
I'm sorry.
It was a pleasure talking with you about your film, which I remind our listeners is called They Call Me Babu. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
We have reached the conclusion of the second episode of the Big Fred Tuesday. But before we say fare thee well, here's some interesting news from the world of film that we have come across over the past few days. Here we go. The Locarno Festival's Open Doors Hub and Open Doors Lab are dedicated to supporting the development of emerging film industries in the south and east of the world. This year's digital edition marks a continuation of its focus on Southeast Asia, as the 17 projects announced come from 9 different countries of the region. As per official statement, the Hub and Lab participants will gather online via specific platforms and present their projects to international industry professionals through individual meetings scheduled during the first week of the Locarno Festival 2020 from the 6th to the 11th of August. This year's edition of the Locarno Festival will take place online in response to the global pandemic and is being promoted as a year zero, unveiling premieres of today and supporting the films of tomorrow. Overall, it will run from the 5th to the 15th of August. Also, the first edition of the International Migration Film Festival is set to take place in Turkey, the country hosting the largest number of refugees in the world, between the 14th to the 21st of June. Due to the current pandemic, the festival is launched completely online, screening more than 40 films only in Turkey through a special section on Festival Scope. The program contains films from over 25 countries and includes a selection for an international feature film competition, with the best feature film set to be awarded €15,000. Besides the film, the festival will offer masterclasses, Q&As and talks by filmmakers, activists and so on, as well as live concerts and exhibitions on various social media platforms. And finally, the UK's Sheffield Doc Fest has announced its official selection for 2020, which will include 31 world premieres. Overall, the programme includes 115 films of all lengths from 50 countries around the world. This year's edition will mostly take place online via a special VOD platform available with pay-per-view and subscription options for UK-based public audiences, and a film industry-oriented video library available to festival pass holders worldwide. The latter will run from the 8th of June to the 31st of August. And with that, I thank you very much for joining us for this week's Big Fred Tuesday. It's been emotional, I gotta tell you. I urge you all to join me next week as we continue to bring you snapshots of the current state of film and occasionally take a trip down that good old cinematic memory lane. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye, and remember to stay healthy, stay safe, stay strong.
Fred.
Fred Film Radio, I'm Matt Micucci from the 64th Berlin International Film Festival.
Io sono Valentina Pompili al Tokyo International Film Festival.
Soy Antonio Becker y estoy aquí con
den Internationalen Filmfestspielen in Berlin. Mein Name ist Beatrice Behn.
أهلا بكم في Fred Film Radio. Fred, the festival experience in 23 languages.
Fred Film Radio.
24/7 on Fred.fm and smartphone apps.